clear this is a full-scale invasion.
Rubber bullets, helicopters, armored vehicles.
You are tuning into Revolution News Link, linking information, experience, revolutionaries, making it mainstream. I'm your guy, John Tell. Please hit the like button and share the stream. Follow us on all our platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Sorry if you were tuned in to us a few moments ago. We did have some technical difficulties, but we are back. And here's our first story for today.
No room to yell at us.
I want to speak to the fucking person who made this drink. Is that you?
No, it wasn't
we don't know
me.
who made it,
You
so
don't know who made it?
there's 4 of us here, so we obviously don't know.
Fucking stupid, fucking ignorant high school kids.
Okay,
I
bye.
want to speak to the fucking
Bye.
man.
Okay, you can
Yeah,
call
stop,
corporate
stop.
whenever you want. Goodbye.
John, stop. You're on camera.
Fuck
You're on
out of
camera.
here.
You're on camera.
Fucking bitch.
No, I don't care.
Give it to me right now.
What?
I'm calling the police. I'm calling the police. Gianna,
I want your telephone. Shut the fuck
You
up.
shut up. Get out. You can call corporate
Stupid
whenever you
fucking
want.
idiot.
Bye.
You're a fucking idiot.
Okay, good for you. Bye.
I want the
Bye.
fucking telephone.
Bye.
Shut up.
You shut up. You're not gonna tell me to shut up. The fuck? Who are you? Who are you?
Fucking immigrant loser.
What? Fuck you.
Get the fuck out! Get the fuck out! You have no room to yell at us.
I want
So that altercation took place in Fairfield, Connecticut. It was a Merrill Lynch financial advisor. He, of course, was arrested for allegedly throwing a smoothie at a teenage employee, calling her a fucking immigrant. And, of course, he since has been fired after the footage of that racist rant went viral. James Iannazzo, 48 years old, grown-ass man. And he was charged with a hate crime following that chaotic scene in Robex and Fairfield. Of course, this was back in January, so this did not happen too recently. However, the post did go viral, and he claimed it was because he feared for his son's life due to a peanut allergy transpiring and threatening his son's life. That's what he claims. And still, regardless, there is no excuse to use race. There's no excuse for racism. There is no excuse for racism. I'm going to go ahead and post that link in the comments for those who want to check it out. Boom. Right down there for you. Yeah, so in other news, as the U.S. says it will welcome up to 100,000 Ukrainian refugees fleeing the Russian invasion, immigration officials say they're preparing for a surge of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border as it ends the Trump-era pandemic restriction called Title 42 in response to humanitarian outcry. A new report by the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights and the Haitian Bridge Alliance documents the full scope of the abuses Haitians faced while they were being held in a makeshift camp near the border under a bridge in Del Rio, Texas. They describe being subjected to violence, racial slurs, and intimidation, and denied sufficient access to food, water, and medical care. And of course, this is coming just as the U.S. has announced it will welcome up to 100,000 presumably white Ukrainian refugees fleeing the Russian invasion. And when President Biden visited with Ukrainian refugees in Poland this past weekend, he was shown embracing a Ukrainian child. In El Salvador, the president says authorities have arrested over 2,000 people since the state of emergency was imposed following a violent weekend. Police say they are targeting suspected members of gangs by cordoning off entire neighborhoods and conducting house by house searches. Human Rights Watch has expressed concern about the crackdown, saying that instead of protecting Salvadorians, that this broad state of emergency can be a recipe for disaster that could put their lives and rights at risk. And there's actually more to this story. I will find the previous article that we did post on the Leon Black Independent Media Facebook page, so you can get more backstory to what's transpiring in El Salvador. A federal judge in Colorado has awarded $14 million to 12 people who were injured by Denver police during a protest in 2020, calling for racial justice following the police killing of George Floyd. The plaintiffs included a man who suffered a fractured skull and bleeding in his brain after police had shot him in the head with a projectile. Nicole Hannah-Jones calls for slavery reparations in a speech to the UN General Assembly on Tuesday. The UN marked the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. Nicole Hannah, the creator of the New York Times groundbreaking 1619 project, addressed the UN General Assembly, saying that it is time for the nations that engaged in and profited from the transatlantic slave trade to do what is right and what is just. It is time for them to make reparations to the descendants of chattel slavery in the Americas. This is our global truth. The truth we as human beings understand with stark clarity. There can be no atonement if there's no repair. California is moving ahead with its plan to become the first state to offer reparations on Tuesday. A state task force voted to limit reparations to the descendants of free and enslaved people who were in the United States in the 19th century by a 5-4 vote. The task force rejected calls to offer reparations to all Black people, regardless of when they came to the country. The prominent journalist Raina Ayub was blocked Tuesday from flying out of Mumbai when she was scheduled to fly to London to give a speech about the intimidation of women journalists. She has faced several repercussions for openly criticizing the Indian Prime Minister, including the freezing of her bank account. Workers at the publishing giant Condé Nast are unionizing with the News Guild of New York. The new union will represent over 500 workers at Vogue, Vanity Fair, GQ, Bon Appetit, and other publications. And also in related news, workers at a Starbucks in Knoxville, Tennessee have voted to become the first unionized Starbucks in the South. The company is disputing one ballot in a move that could alter the election results. Also, the turnout, for the second Bessemer Amazon union vote was lower than first officials with the National Labor Relations Board saying the official counseling of votes in the second union election at Amazon Bessemer Fulfillment Center could begin tomorrow afternoon. Amazon workers in New York began voting in union election workers at the company's JFK 8 Staten Island warehouse, started casting ballots on Friday on whether to form a union as labor organizers look to New York for the first ever union victory in the retail giant's 28-year history. As the second largest private employer, Amazon has long been a focus for labor advocates who hope that a single union victory will spark organizing efforts across the country. The push to organize spearheaded by a group of workers known as the Amazon Labor Union. In-person voting will last until March 30th, with both set to be counted on 31st. The National Labor Relations Board found that Amazon improperly interfered in the original contest when the company won by a vote 2-1 margin. The American labor movement has gained momentum over the past year, motivated by the high-profile Alabama campaign, ongoing pandemic concerns, and strikes. Two of Brittney Griner's USA basketball teammates have broken their silence on the star player's imprisonment in Russia. Most NBA players have been hesitant to talk about Griner's detention on a patent drug charges in Russia, hoping to avoid potentially hurting her case. Players have been keeping discussions about how to best help Griner within their community. And WNBA players have been very hesitant in the past when rallying behind issues such as voter registration or Black Lives Matter, but ended up being pretty much at I wouldn't say at the forefront, but compared to counterparts, have really been outspoken about it, especially in recent years. But it was decided that this was better for them to say less. Russia has been a popular destination for WNBA players over the past 2 decades because of the money they can make playing there in the winter. The WNBA has made strides to increase player salaries and find other ways to compensate players in the last collective bargaining agreement, which was ratified in 2020. The contract runs through 2027, and it will pay players an average of $130,000, with the top stars able to earn more than $500,000 through salary marking agreements and in-season tournament and bonuses. The legal team for the 2-time Olympic gold medalist has been quietly seeking Griner's release and has declined to speak out about the case since her arrest was made public. Of the thousands of U.S. citizens arrested and jailed in prisons abroad, a small subset are designated by the U.S. government as wrongfully detained, a category that affords their cases an extra level of government attention. The U.S. government has not yet put Griner's case in that category. Griner is not the only American detained in Russia. There is a Marine veteran and a Michigan corporate secretary executive. U.S. officials have publicly called for Moscow to release them as well. Zimbabwe has begun repossessing idle land from Black farmers who benefited from controversial land reforms 2 decades ago. People whose farmland is lying unused and those who own multiple farms will lose the land and be given to aspiring farmers from a waiting list left from earlier rounds of land reform. The former president had launched land reforms in 2000, forcibly removing white farmers and giving their land to blacks. This time, it's taking land from black farmers and giving it back to other black farmers. But the scheme the former president was supposed to redress legacies of British colonialism, but in practice, many of the former president's close allies ended up with the multiple farms. Many new farmers had little knowledge, training, or support, and vast swaths of land ran out of use once used to be known as a breadbasket. Zimbabwe now suffers from chronic food shortages, while 250,000 farmers are on the waiting list for land. The tug of war between a majority black town in Tennessee and state officials is intensifying as the state controller's office has given the town an ultimatum. Fixed accounts, financial troubles of the county will take over if the state controller has pledged to restructure the town's financial supervision and pushed officials of Mason, Tennessee to give up their charter if they cannot pay off their debt. So there is a link I do have I will put in, the comments. Here it is. Because this article is pretty detailed, and it is, Mason is a small town about 40 miles from Memphis. and has had a, a history of late audits and has not submitted its annual audit since 2001 on time. But apparently now there's a concern because the town is welcoming a $5.8 billion Ford Motor Company plant for by 2025 called Blue Oval City. The plant would be about 10 miles outside of the city center of Mason. Town officials say the controller's office actions are racially biased because the state only intervened once the plant was coming to the area and has helped majority white towns in their finances without pushing them to relinquish their charters. 7 out of 8 Mason officials are black, which differs from the racial makeup 7 years ago, and which all elected officials were white residents, were white. Excuse me. 7 years ago, all of the elected officials were white. Residents are also frustrated, and they believe if the town was majority white, the controller's office would have acted differently from the beginning. The mayor says the town will suffer a tremendous financial blow if it surrendered its 153-year-old charter because all of the estimated funds from the new project will go to Tipton County instead of directly to the town. The 3,600-acre campus that the Ford plant is expected to build will bring about 600 new jobs to the area, according to the Ford Motor Company. The Ford Motor Company also said they are aware of the tension between the town and the controller's office, and they have not yet been directly involved. I do have some articles to share with you concerning Clarence Thomas and his wife, Ginny. There are headlines from Democracy Now! That you definitely should read and take note of. Everyone wants to talk about the slap and really hone in on what is going on with that. However, during that time frame, there has been a lot of other things that has transpired. While I am on this topic, though, Will Smith does face potential suspension and expulsion from the Academy, and they said that he was asked to leave the Oscars after slapping Chris Rock, despite refs being asked by organizers. So I'm not sure how true this is. Again, we're not going to spend time speaking on that because there are more serious things going on around the world. However, we will utilize certain notes of that discussion incident to encourage some discussions on the Leon Block Independent Media Network. So you can definitely check it out on other lives that we, will most likely do to talk about the intricacies of the situation. But if you want more information on the stories that we shared tonight and talked about tonight, definitely go to the comments on the Leon Block Independent Media Facebook page, where you can find links to most of, if not all, of the stories that we talked about tonight. If you have any stories you would like to share with us, feel free to DM us at the Leon Block Independent Media on Facebook, or you can email us at theleonblock@gmail.com. We love to hear from you, and it is our duty, it is what we are here for, to share information and put the news out in a way that mainstream media, is not going to. And also, please follow us on all our social media platforms. Subscribe to us on our YouTube channel as well. Also, there is a episode on Democracy Now! About, for one, the non-white refugees fleeing Ukraine amidst the war, and they're being held in detention centers in Poland, Estonia, and Austria. And we talked about this the other day, but more information is coming out about it. I will go ahead and share that link for you all as well in the comment section. Now, Democracy Now! Did an interview with Maria Hinojosa and Guerlain Joseph about the U.S. preparing for the surge of migrants at the southern border, yet they're welcoming 100,000 Ukrainian refugees. So just take a listen to this.
Really mistreating and abusing them, and today close to 21,000 people have been deported by President Biden to Haiti.
And I'd like to bring Maria Hinojosa into the conversation. Maria, I wanted to ask you if you could talk about your experiences in reporting on the continuing now several years of reporting on the problems at the U.S. border. But also this, not only the racial aspect of U.S. policy when it comes to asylum seekers, but there's also a political aspect. As we know, for instance, during the 1980s, Nicaraguans were welcomed, granted asylum, while Salvadorans and Guatemalans were denied asylum by the United States because the United States wanted to expose and condemn the Sandinistas at the time. I wonder your sense of how this is playing out, both the racial aspects and the political aspects now.
So, Juan, it's great to be with you, and Amy and Guerlain as well. Look, Juan, it hasn't been years that I've been covering this. I've been covering this for decades. And, when I think about everything that Guerlain just talked about, the point is that this country, the United States, has a narrative that it lives by, that says that we are an immigrant-loving country and that we love and accept refugees. And what we are saying, journalists, activists on the ground, is that that narrative is not true. And what we are seeing is, in fact, ugly to say it, but white supremacy in the context of refugees and desperate people. So what did I see, Juan, when I was down in December in Mexico and then in Colombia on the border with Panama? Juan, I have reported about this for decades, but I've never had the chance to be on a caravan. And when I got to the caravan, the United States, the mainstream media, our colleagues talk about the caravan as this scary, frightful thing. In fact, Donald Trump raised this whole specter of the caravan. But how many U.S. government officials, human rights officials have been with the caravan so that they can see what I saw? It is a caravan of love. It is a caravan of solidarity. It is the place when you are traveling through Mexico, if you are Black, as increasingly the migrants and refugees are, the caravan is the only place that you will feel safe. These immigrants, migrants, and refugees are the smartest people when they decide to join a caravan. The fact that the United States mainstream media and the government has chosen to portray the caravans as filled with scary, terrible people who are going to force their way onto the border, it's not true. That's not what they're doing. They are exactly as the Ukrainian refugees are right now. They are desperate, and they are looking to a country that says that they will accept them. Now, just very quickly, last night I was finally able to get in touch with Udi, who is from Nigeria. And he left me a message last night. I said, just bring me up to date. He did finally make it into the United States, but he was held for 4 months in a detention camp. This is a young man who, when I saw him in the jungle, he was like, I got this. We're going to do this. I'm going to, the message he left me said, I don't even want to think about what I've been through. It has been so terrible, so horrific. And the worst part of his travels has been being in the United States in an immigrant detention camp and the disrespect that he had to feel. And finally, as Guerlain was saying, what this government is doing, a government that says that it appreciates refugees, that has a president that will hug a little Ukrainian girl, what they did to the Familia Felix in our story was that they lied to them. And the US government, Border Patrol and ICE told them that they were going to be taken to Miami. And when the doors of the plane opened, they had been lied to. They were sent back to Haiti, a country they haven't lived in for over a decade. So the pleas that we have, people say, oh, Maria, you're so obsessed with migrants and refugees. That's because you're an immigrant yourself. You're so Mexican. It's like, no, I'm obsessed with the capacity that this country has for inhumanity, and specifically watching how that inhumanity is being thrust on people who are Black and simply seeking refuge.
Maria, I mean, the fact that you gave a voice to people is what the mainstream media is doing right now with Ukrainians. It is a model of how all refugees should be treated. So I wanted to go to your reports for the series you did where you met this Haitian family, the family Felix, in the Mexican state of Oaxaca, as they made their way north with a migrant caravan. The Felix family, as you said, fled Haiti over a decade ago after the horrendous earthquake, that seriously dangerous, dense jungle that stretches across the Colombian and Panamanian border.
Comemos leche en polvo y chocolate en polvo. Así, y bebé al agua del río. Vimos muchas personas muertas ahí.
Sí, los vimos como tres.
Felix's children tell me they saw dead bodies in the jungle, people who looked like them, but they had to keep going. Eventually, they were detained by Panamanian police and sent back to Colombia. So they had to do the unthinkable, start all over again and cross back into the Debian jungle.
So in January, over 2 months after you said goodbye to the Felix family in Oaxaca, you received the message from the mother asking you to call her.
Buenos días. Videlín. Amor. Ay, Videlín, ¿qué pasó?
Yo no sé.
¿Qué pasó?
Yo no sé.
Qué cosa más horrible, Videlín, qué cosa más horrible.
Llegamos allá, duramos como 15 días en la prisión y de ahí nos colocaron en avión en Texas y nos regresaron aquí en Haití.
Videlín and her entire family is now in Haiti. 10 years after she escaped the devastation of an earthquake that destroyed everything that she had worked for, after birthing her 2 youngest children in the Dominican Republic, after living in South America for years, after crossing the Darien jungle twice, she and her family made it to the U.S., but 15 days later, the Biden administration deported them back to Haiti.
That's Maria Hinojosa's report called The Moving Border. It is so moving, Maria. And if you can talk about what the actions have meant, because as you talk about this caravan of hope and of love, it's the immigrant rights movement that has forced this action that's expected to be announced today, ending Title 42, which has used the pandemic as a way to prevent so many immigrants. We certainly haven't heard this in the case of Ukraine, but coming into the United States or being detained once they do.
You know, Amy, what I'm hoping, but I have not so much of it. This was a perfect opportunity, in fact, for the Biden administration to completely switch everything up. This is a moment where the Biden administration could say, we're changing everything now because we are going to be committed to what we say we are. This is a moment where the Biden administration could not only get rid of Title 42, stop MPP, reorganize the Border Patrol, because we all saw with our own eyes Border Patrol officials on horses with whips on Black people. So we cannot be gaslit upon what we are living. Sadly, it looks like the Biden administration is more interested in appeasing to people who are afraid of migrants and refugees and Black people. And our job as journalists is to say, look at the treatment of Ukrainian refugees, look at the treatment of Honduran, Salvadoran, Guatemalan, Haitian, African migrants and refugees, and there has to be one way to treat all humanity. So I'm feeling quite desperate. You know, Viveline and I are in touch. She's desperate to get help. She says that now that she's in Haiti, she's terrified for her 2 young girls because it's so unsafe. So, you know, Amy, for me personally, as a human being, this is ripping into my heart. As a journalist, you know, I'm just like, I'm going to keep at it. I'm not going to stop. And I'm going to demand accountability, because what we are seeing is not just the suffering of Ukrainian refugees, but people on our side of the continent. And they need love. And they need that hug from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, both of them, to say, we welcome you. We see you and we welcome you. And thank you, Amy and Juan, for recognizing the journalism and for allowing me to get a little emotional, because, hey, if you lose all your emotion, then what good are we as journalists?
Juan, we aren't able to hear you.
Wow. So my point here in bringing that clip up was to discuss. There was no way that I could simply just report that. There was no way that I could simply just read that off. I had to make sure that Maria and Guerline did their job as reporters and let them speak to what is going on. But God damn it, we send a message loud and clear, don't we, to how America feels about Black people, blatantly to our faces. This is a whole topic and discussion that we definitely will be talking about on the other platforms here on the Leon Block. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you did not hear our story on the Leon Block earlier, definitely check this out. Spread the story, share awareness about Africa. There is more information on the Leon Block Independent Media Facebook page. Check out more there. So that is about it for tonight. We will certainly have more for you all at a later date.
We've been asking for TPS for 2 years. We've been begging President Biden and Vice President Harris, Susan Rice to please
definitely stay tuned.
They can free, at least be protected from deportation, and they have refused. And we see within a week TPS was provided for Ukraine. That is why we continue to push and ask for TPS for Cameroon. We cannot wait any longer to make sure that equity is a part of our immigration system, that people from Cameroon are receiving TPS as soon as possible. And we commend the administration for highlighting and validating the lives of Ukrainians and the lives of our Afghan community. But it is past due for TPS to be provided for Cameroon. And what we say is protection delay is protection denied. And we again seeing right now how we have allowed exemption for Ukrainians and Russians that are coming at the US-Mexico border. Juan and Amy, I was there last Monday really trying to highlight the damage of Title 42. And I clearly remember in 2020, April 2020, when the Haitian Bridge Alliance sent the first letter starting a campaign to add President Trump to end Title 42 because it did not bear any water as to